Rob has been Chief Executive of the FMA since February 2014. After working as a capital markets lawyer at international law firm Allen Overy, Rob spent 17 years at Merrill Lynch in London, Hong Kong and New York in a variety of senior roles, including General Counsel and COO for Europe, Middle East and Africa. He also spent a year as a director at regulatory consultants Promontory before moving to New Zealand at the end of 2013.
Rob, good to see you, and thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
And thank you for agreeing to be part of our leadership series, where we talk to leading CEOs about last year and this year and the future. So I really appreciate it. The first question we've really got for you is 2020, quite a year obviously, all about the pandemic.
Yeah.
What were the challenges for you as the CEO of the FMA of the pandemic in particular, but last year in general?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the people aspects, which obviously continue, actually some of them, and then the kind of really rapid adapting to a whole bunch of circumstances that you hadn't really planned for. So I think, for me, it was first and foremost getting staff comfortable with the changed environment, i.e. them being at home mostly. And for some of those people being under some personal pressure because of their home environment or what was happening to family overseas in particular. So getting people comfortable with that very rapid change of kind of physical circumstances. And then getting acceptance that everything we'd planned for those next few months pretty much was going out the window. So it was about asking people, both in their personal circumstances, but also in their work circumstances, to just do stuff really differently and to be comfortable that it wasn't always going to get done right the first time, but people needed to learn how to make that happen. So we all had to get used to Zoom calls and Teams calls and all the rest of it, but we also had to get used to working in an environment where there isn't someone next to you that you can bounce something off. And how do you do that when everyone's on email all day? So I think it was that very difficult combination of a major external event that was probably affecting quite a lot of the staff more than they realized. And then realizing you've got a job to do, and that job had just suddenly changed. So that we had to, reallocate lots of our people very rapidly. You ended up with some people really not very busy and some people absolutely buried. And then how do you adjust that? So yeah, it was adapting. It was crisis-driven change, but a crisis that looked like it might go on for a considerable period. So it's not just a couple of weeks.
What sort of reactions did you get inside the organisation to those changes?
Really good. A lot of organisations find themselves able to do things in a crisis that they don't seem to be able to pull off when they're in normal environments. And so I think it really showed the power of everyone pulling in the same direction without quibbling and without really arguing about it, just knowing what needed to get done. So I think in that perspective, and we had our remote working, our home working stuff pretty well sorted. So from that perspective, we felt relatively seamless compared to, I think, a lot of other organisations. But as it dragged on, then you start to move out of, say, the immediate crisis and where we were all in lockdown together into a much more blended environment where some people might be locked down and some people aren't, some people are in the office, some people aren't. Then I think adjusting to that and trying to work out, was that a permanent change or were we still in that period of flux? I think that was tougher. So initial response, absolutely fantastic and heroic from some sections of our staffers in most organisations, but the longer it went on, the harder it got because people were looking for that return to normality, and it probably still hasn't happened.
What about lessons? And I guess by that I mean lessons both for the FMA but also you as a CEO. What lessons did you sort of take away? What learnings did you have through last year? Yeah,
it's a really good question. You like to think you're prepared for change, but actually the way we work is that we identify the change we think is going to happen and then we prepare for it. Was actually, I think, what the message that last year rammed home for me, both from a people leadership perspective and the leader of an organisation, is that it's likely that the change you need to prepare for won't be any of the things you've planned. So creating an environment where people can shift work patterns and shift the work they're doing and reprioritize resource allocation quickly and naturally. For me, the real lesson was ramming that home, which is we thought we'd done that, but actually what we now see is that we were probably a little bit, as most organisations are, set by our work plan and our priorities and our budgets and how we'd gone through a resource allocation, and a little bit reluctant over a longer period just to throw that all out the window. And so whether it's working from home versus working in the office, or whether it's prioritising this particular piece of work over that particular piece of work, I think it's encouraging a workforce to be expecting flexibility and change. It's the agile, if I could use that term, it's that agile sense. And with the greatest respects to lawyers and accountants, a lot of our staff have come from that background and they're used to a more designed work life. And what we're saying to people is there will be some design, but actually most of it won't survive the year, and that needs to be okay. So I think that for me, in how you run an organisation and how you coach your people, I suspect that's the life we're all going to be living in the next few years.
Almost forced agility as a result of
this. Yeah. And culturally, doing all the planning that you can, but just reminding people that you have to have mechanisms in place for a quick shift and a quick pivot. And regulators are not generally known for quick pivots, and not everyone is immediately comfortable with that. So I think it's building a culture of willingness to tear up the playbook and do something significantly different, and without really knowing whether that's the right course of action. It's not for everyone, but the lesson for me is you have to design that in the way you allocate resource, but the way you set up a constant review of where that resource is being allocated, so that it becomes the norm that you shift things as you go, rather than it feels like a crisis.
And for you as a leader, did it change the way you lead personally?
Well, I think for me, it probably accentuated the people aspect of leadership, in that I think most of my staff would say I'm a very people-oriented leader in the first place. But when you're going through a crisis where people's home environments are also under threat and under pressure, in their family environments, we have a lot of staff with family overseas, and obviously for a period New Zealand looked like it was going in a very difficult direction. So I think it accentuated for me the need to be there for the people that work for you, and to be conscious of where life was difficult for them, even if you couldn't fix it. So I think it was about making sure your people leaders are plugged into how people are feeling, even if you're not seeing them face to face. And some of those people may not be particularly great at expressing their anxieties. And I think, again, for people leaders of my generation, not everybody is naturally that empathetic. And I think it told us that through a period of crisis, you have to dial up the empathy. And it has to be authentic, but you have to consciously dial it up.
A lot of leaders have commented to us they never knew as much about people's home lives as they did through the Zoom. Did you find that?
Yeah, I did. And I loved it, actually. It humanises people and reminds you that, that people inevitably bring into their work some of what's happening to them in the background. And that, particularly a relatively small organisation like the FMA, we ought to be paying real attention to how people are coping in the round. And I think the mental health stuff that's become so prominent in the last few years, obviously COVID will have massively exacerbated that particular issue. Everything I hear tells me all the helplines, all the counselling services are absolutely swamped. So again, there's now an element of counselling and looking after people as part of being a senior leader and a CEO that probably wasn't there 10 years ago, or wasn't there for everybody. And I think that's just the workplace now, and it's actually what younger employees expect.
You've touched on a few of these already, I think, but looking forward then, what do you think the opportunities are now that we're in this somewhat changed world going forward for leaders and for the FMA as well? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a huge opportunity for a reset, and that applies to everything actually. Global economies, globalization of trade, all the way down to how people do their work and what you expect of your employees. And I just hope that we don't all, particularly in New Zealand, where actually compared to most other countries, we've actually gone back to relative normality very quickly. I just hope we don't miss the opportunity to really rethink how people work, why they go to an office, why we have our lives kind of set up in the way that we do, and could we make our people, for instance, more productive with the working from home thing. We're looking at whether the needle's gone too far on the dial, and we're worrying about newer staff, of whom we're hiring lots of staff at the moment. They're arriving in a half-empty office. Most of their team aren't in every day. You worry about how you bring those people into your culture and your community if in fact half the office isn't there on any given day. All of those things. I think we've got a real opportunity here to rethink, for us as an organisation, why are we here and how are we delivering that, and what are we delivering for our people, what are we delivering for market participants and consumers. So we are consciously reassessing all of that, partly because our remit's changing and expanding, so we've got a challenge of growth, but also partly, I think, as a result of last year, which is we're quite a young organisation. We're only 10 years old. We don't have to do it the way we've been doing it today, and that goes all the way down to what hours people are in the office and how people work. So it's not missing that opportunity. I think is, for me, that there is a massive opportunity to rethink, and it's complicated. We don't know whether what we're doing now will still be what we're doing in 2 years' time. We don't know if it's right. But I think you have to look.
It's interesting the point you make around newer people joining. We've had quite a lot of feedback that people mid-career are very happy to be working from home. But if you're starting your first job and you're sitting in your kitchen, how do you learn? How do you get the wisdom of older people who've been doing the job for 20 years? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even for those people that have a more comfortable home environment and have a more established working relationship with the people around them, so that actually working from homes doesn't feel that disruptive. I genuinely feel there's a collaborative piece and a almost unconscious picking up of what's going on around you. The research, certainly for trading floors, suggests that small teams might be fine, but the greater whole suffers because there's less spread of information and discussion and thinking. And I think we are slightly at risk of overdoing it, and I really do worry about people whose home environments aren't very conducive to working, or as you say, they need to learn from the people around them. And even if you try as a senior leader, it's hard to teach people on email, and you can't be on Zoom calls all day. So modeling the job you want people to sort of develop capability, and that's hard when one of you's not in the office. So we're thinking quite hard about providing the opportunity for flexibility in people's lives. That has gone down very, very well with staff, but just moderating the extreme edges of that to make sure there's still a sense of community in the office, and the younger or newer staff feel integrated in a way that I think is challenging at the moment.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of that feedback. Thanks, Rob. That's really useful to get your insights, really helpful, and we'll look forward to the year ahead.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.